Relics is one of those incredibly important Japanese games that was genre-defining. It is a cornerstone game without which video games would be a very different place. This isn't Relics. This is Relics Ankoku Yousai, a semi-remake, semi-sequel created exclusively for the Famicom Disk System, and it's mainly known for being one of the most frustratingly bad games on the system. The original Relics, released in February of 1986, was the very first game that you could call a platform adventure game, or Metroidvania if you like. Since it was released 6 months before Metroid, that is just enough time for 1986 development that it's reasonably likely that Metroid was directly inspired by Relics. The plot of the game is Manichaeism. There are two vast spiritual entities driving the world, one light and one dark. The dark one overran the world and created a vast fortress, the Ankoku Yousai of the title. The dark also abducted the radiant princess who brought light to the galaxy, and is keeping her at the top of the dark fortress. The light has a champion, but only a spirit can infiltrate the dark fortress, and so the soul of that champion takes possession of a body within it and starts finding their way through the structure. What this means in gameplay terms is that you have to find your way through a vast maze of side-scrolling chambers, locate 5 talismans hidden in distant corners, gain new abilities so that you can access new areas, and finally, make your way to the princess. As you're walking around, hitting A jumps and B attacks, and then after that the controls get complicated. Relics is one of those games where your orientation matters for your movement, so if you're facing right and you push right, then you'll walk forward, but if you push left, you don't turn around, you just pace backwards a little bit. If you hit down to crouch, you don't have to hold it, you just stay crouched. You have to hit up to stand up again, and if you're standing up, pressing up will make you rotate 90 degrees so that your back is to the camera. In that position, you can climb up ladders, but more importantly, you can hit left or right to turn in that direction. It's a little bit awkward, it isn't really used for anything, but it doesn't take too long to get used to it. The other major feature is that after you defeat certain enemies, you can possess their bodies. That's how you gain new abilities that are useful for accessing additional areas. I'm afraid I can't show that off though, because I never got that far. That's because Relics Ankoku Yousai is excessively difficult, brutally unfair, and broken in ways that will just make you miserable. The first thing that everyone notices here is this. If you're going to play this version of Relics, you better get used to seeing Omachi Kudasai, or please wait. The game goes through a lengthy load cycle anytime you transition the screen vertically, or anytime a new enemy shows up. And because of the stiff controls, it's really easy to fall back down after you've gone up, in which case you have a lengthy load going up, a lengthy load going back down, and then another lengthy load as you try to go back up again. It makes this game incredibly frustrating to play. You'll spend a lot of time just sitting around waiting for the game to get going. And all of this is made worse when there's things like invisible pitfalls that you can just walk onto and get dumped down a floor. By the way, if you fall into the basement early on, it's impossible to get out without exploiting a bug. Fortunately, it is easy to exploit that bug. If you jump and then hit attack, you can jump again immediately. The attacks for your starting character are exceptionally slow, and you can only attack once while you're in the air, which makes dealing with enemies, especially flying enemies, absurdly difficult. There's also no period of invincibility after you get hit, so if an enemy has a shot that goes through you, your entire health bar evaporates in an instant. Your own attacks seem to hit or not hit effectively at random. This is not an intentional part of the game, it's just that the attacks in Collision don't really work very well. I do have one nice thing to say about the attacks. You can attack all of the terrain in Relics. Striking the gray bricks will destroy a section of the level, and you can find hidden items this way. That's the good news. The bad news is most of the hidden items don't do you a whole lot of good. There's an item like a sword or Bible that will power up particular bodies, and there are health recovery items that will restore 1 or 2 points of health. Except, of course, you take a lot more damage than 1 or 2 points when you get hit, and there aren't that many health refills around. The good news is you can save your progress when you get a game over. The bad news is that you go back to the start of the fortress and have to fight your way through everything again. A couple more items of general use that you can find include lamps that will light dark areas and keys that will open up closed passages. If you do manage to collect all the artifacts and get to the princess, there's one more nasty trick lying in wait for you. Unless you move exactly right after getting past the final boss, the game will crash without showing you the ending. Relics, Ankoku Yousai, is a bad enough game that Japanese players signal it out as one of the worst on the Disk System. But, because of its ties to a historically significant and popular game, there have been re-releases of it that attempt to fix up these problems. Get rid of the load times, make the controls more responsive, basically improve how the whole thing feels. I don't even know if I'd want to try one of those versions at this point, but if you want to play the good version of this, or at least better version, the original version of Relics has been released in the US for the first time just a few weeks prior to my recording of this. It's available on the Nintendo Switch right now. As for my view on Relics Ankoku Yousai, playing this is like having a really bad toothache. The combat doesn't work. The game is buggy as hell. And then there's the loading times. There's actually an outline of a decent game here, and that's because that outline is taken from a decent game. But just on the Famicom Disk System, Relics Ankoku Yousai is one of the worst times you could have.